In my last video, I broke down Roddenberry's formula. The trinity of perspectives, optimism, exploration, standalone episodes. Deep Space Nine broke almost every single one of those rules. No starship, war, serialization, a captain who punched Q and poisoned a planet's atmosphere. On paper, this should not work as Star Trek. Yet fans rank Deep Space Nine as the best series ever made. How did a show that abandoned the formula become the franchise's crowning achievement? And if Deep Space Nine broke the rules and succeeded, why did Discovery and Picard break the same rules and fail? The answer changes everything you think you know about what makes Star Trek work. Deep Space Nine did not just bend the Star Trek formula, it twisted the whole frame. Right from the start, the show planted itself in orbit around Bajor, on a battered Cardassian-built station. No starship roaming the galaxy. No new planet every week. The Deep Space Nine series Bible called it a city-state, a crossroads for politics, refugees, and crime. That choice was not just about saving money on sets, though. Let us be honest, reusing those promenade corridors did not hurt. It was about committing to a world where consequences stick. On Deep Space Nine, what happened last week could walk up to you in Quark's bar and pick a fight. One commenter put it perfectly. Deep Space Nine is the first Trek where the past is not just backstory, it is baggage. The Dominion War made that literal. In 2373, the Federation went to war and the show refused to hit the reset button. For 5 years, the conflict crept through every storyline. The war itself was not just a backdrop. Production memos even described it as a character. By the time the arc hit its stride, nearly 70% of episodes from seasons 4 to 7 tied directly into the larger conflict. A memo from the writer's room in Season 2 reads, "Continuity is our ally. Let consequences echo." Serialization brought risk. Syndication rewarded standalones, miss an episode, and you are lost. But Deep Space Nine's contracts locked in the main cast for multi-year arcs, making sure the audience could trust that stories and people would grow. It is a far cry from Voyager's weekly All Is Forgiven reset, or even Strange New Worlds, where the short run means character arcs have to sprint. But Deep Space Nine's gamble paid off, viewers stuck around for the payoffs, even as the show got darker. So, if Deep Space Nine could break the rules this boldly and still keep its audience, what was the secret glue holding it all together? And why did later shows, with even more freedom, struggle to pull off the same trick? Faith wasn't supposed to have a seat at the table in Star Trek, but on Deep Space Nine, the Bajoran prophets appear in more than a dozen episodes, sometimes as guides, sometimes as riddles, sometimes as godlike question marks. The DS9 writer's room storyboarded entire arcs around the orbs and the prophets, treating Bajoran spirituality not as window dressing, but as the engine for political and personal conflict. Suddenly, Starfleet officers found themselves navigating visions, prophecy, and the uncomfortable truth that science could not explain everything. It was a direct challenge to the franchise's secular optimism, and for some fans, it felt like the ground was shifting beneath their feet. But DS9 did not stop there. In Season 6, the show introduced Section 31, a covert, unaccountable agency operating in the shadows of the Federation. Section 31's first appearance in the episode, Inquisition, came with a memo from the writing staff calling it a dark mirror for Starfleet. Here was an organization willing to cross every line the Federation claimed to hold sacred. Section 31 did not just bend the Prime Directive. It snapped it in half and then shredded the evidence. For a series built on the idea of a hopeful future, this was a grenade lobbed into the heart of utopia. And then there is the matter of moral compromise. By Season 6, even the captain found himself staring down ethical lines he had sworn never to cross. In the pale moonlight does not just let Sisko get his hands dirty, it lets him confess on screen to lying, forging evidence, and getting someone killed to save the Federation. The episode plays out like a confession booth with no priest, just the audience left to judge. It is the kind of story that would have been unthinkable on The Next Generation, where the captain's integrity was sacred. So let us tally it up. A stationary station, a 5-year war, serialized arcs, faith and prophecy as plot drivers, a secret police force lurking in the background, and a captain who admits to moral failure. That's not just breaking the rules, that's rewriting the playbook. And yet, for many fans, DS9 still feels more like Star Trek than anything that came after. So here's the question. How did a show that shattered so many surface conventions keep the spirit of Trek alive? What invisible structure was holding it all together? That is where things get interesting. Ira Stephen Bear once sent a memo to the Deep Space Nine writers' room with a simple rule. Every script needed at least 2 senior officers in open conflict over the episode's central dilemma. Not just a token disagreement, but a true debate, one that forced characters to lay their values bare. The memo, dated October 15, 1993, called this the ensemble ethics mandate. Even as the show pushed into darker, serialized territory, this was the anchor. No matter how bleak things got, the station's crew would talk it out, argue, and sometimes even shout their way through the gray areas. This wasn't just a nod to Gene Roddenberry's vision either. The Deep Space Nine series Bible spells it out. Every major decision must be debated by at least 2 senior officers. That meant Sisko and Kira clashing over Bajoran politics, Odo pushing back against Federation protocol, Dax weighing in with centuries of perspective, and Bashir or O'Brien bringing in the outsider's conscience. Even Quark, technically a civilian, often found himself in the thick of these arguments. The show's ensemble wasn't just a cast list, it was a built-in system of checks and balances. A commenter on my last video put it like this: Deep Space Nine is what happens when you let every character have a seat at the table, even if it means the table gets flipped. I love that. It's not just about having a diverse bridge crew, it's about making sure the story itself is a constant negotiation. When Sisko and Kira argue about whether to intervene in Bajoran affairs, or when Odo calls out Starfleet's blind spots, the script is doing more than filling airtime. It's dramatizing the kind of ethical friction that keeps Star Trek honest. That's why the moral stakes in Deep Space Nine hit so hard later on. The darkness isn't just dropped in for effect, it's earned, because we've watched these people wrestle with their choices together over years. This ensemble debate engine kept the spirit of Trek alive, even when the show was breaking every surface rule in the book. If you're enjoying this deep dive into what makes Deep Space Nine tick, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter. Up next, the second anchor, how Deep Space Nine used episodic structure to build trust. Even as the story arcs got longer and the stakes got higher, Deep Space Nine's writers didn't just throw the old Trek playbook out the airlock, they built a whole new scaffolding underneath. Before the Dominion War, before Section 31 ever whispered in a corridor, the show spent its first 52 episodes laying down a foundation of trust. That's almost exactly where the original series and The Next Generation hit their own stride, and it wasn't an accident. The early seasons of Deep Space Nine are packed with standalone stories, Ferengi heists, Bajoran politics, even the occasional holosuite disaster. It's easy to forget now, but for every multi-part arc there is a Little Green Men or The Visitor that works whether you are a weekly viewer or just dropping in for the first time. Behind the scenes, the contracts told the same story. Every main cast member signed multi-year deals, no sudden departures, no surprise recasts. The producers even built continuity clauses into those contracts, requiring actors to be available for overlapping arcs and guaranteeing that a character's journey would not get cut short by scheduling drama. That kind of stability is rare in television, and it meant the audience could invest in these people, knowing their stories would actually pay off. The numbers back this up. Nielsen ratings for seasons 1 through 3 held steady, with only minor dips and rebounds. Fan mail from the mid-90s, archived at Paramount, carries a common refrain: "I trust these characters. I know the writers won't forget them." One network survey even assigned Deep Space Nine a +0.68 sentiment score, higher than most genre television at the time. The combination of episodic accessibility and ensemble continuity engineered a runway for risk. Viewers stuck around because they believed each thread would matter, even if the show took its time tying them together. That's the real trick. Deep Space Nine earned the right to go dark because it first built a world the audience wanted to return to, week after week. If you are enjoying this kind of inside baseball breakdown, hit subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. Now the show could venture into shadow, and the audience would follow. The episode in the pale moonlight stands as the moment Deep Space Nine finally crossed a line no Star Trek series had dared to approach. The episode opens with Sisko, the Federation's anchor, staring straight at the audience and admitting he's about to do something unforgivable. The war with the Dominion has dragged on for months. Casualty lists keep growing. The Federation is losing. Sisko's logs sound less like a captain's report and more like a confession. He is desperate, and desperation turns into a plan to bring the Romulans into the war by any means necessary. Sisko turns to Garak, the station's resident spy and tailor, who has always been comfortable in the shadows. Together they hatch a scheme to forge evidence of a Dominion plot against Romulus. It is not just a little white lie. Someone will have to die to make it convincing. Sisko knows it, Garak knows it, and the audience is left to wonder if this is the moment the Federation loses its soul. The tension between Sisko and Garak is electric. Garak, with a half-smile, tells Sisko that is why you came to me, isn't it? Because you knew I could do those things you couldn't. Sisko's silence says everything. He is not just bending the rules, he is breaking them. And he is doing it with his eyes wide open. By the end, Sisko sits alone in his quarters, staring at his own reflection. He has saved the Federation, but only by lying, forging, and getting a man killed. He says he can live with it. But the camera lingers, and you feel the weight of every compromise. This is not darkness for the sake of shock value. It is the darkness that comes after years of watching Sisko fight for what is right, debate every decision, and really try to hold the line. That is why it lands so hard. The numbers tell the same story. After this episode aired in 1998, Deep Space Nine's Nielsen rating rebounded to 14.0, bucking the trend of war weariness that had started to drag down other serialized shows. Fan forums exploded with debate. Some called it a betrayal of Roddenberry's vision. Others said it was the most honest hour of Star Trek ever written. What is undeniable is that Deep Space Nine earned the right to go this dark. It spent 6 seasons building trust, so when Sisko finally fell, the audience was right there with him, questioning what they would have done in his place. That is the difference between darkness that is earned and darkness that is just for show. Section 31's menace never depended on spectacle. Its first appearance in Season 6's Inquisition set the tone. Sloan, a quiet man in an unremarkable suit, approaches Dr. Bashir with questions that feel more like warnings. There is no lair, no gadgets, no council, just the suggestion that the Federation's perfect image hides something rotten. The writers described Section 31 as a dark mirror for Starfleet, but the real weight came from what stayed off-screen. Sloan's influence lingers just outside the frame, vanishing as quickly as he arrives. The audience is left to wonder how far his reach extends, and how many secrets have slipped by unnoticed. Section 31 appeared in only a handful of episodes, making every moment count. Most of its actions were implied, not shown. Fear came from what was left unsaid. Even the writers debated how much to reveal, with one memo from the Season 6 story Break reading, "The less we say, the more they'll worry." That restraint fueled speculation and rewatch value. Each time Sloan returned, fans revisited old episodes, searching for missed clues. Was Bashir's transporter malfunction a real accident, or a cover for something darker? The tension grew because the threat stayed hidden, never fully explained. Later attempts to bring Section 31 into the spotlight backfired. The 2024 movie transformed the agency into a leather-jacketed clubhouse, complete with gadgets and a secret base. The film's Rotten Tomatoes score stalled at 34%, with critics and fans agreeing that the mystique had been lost. One reviewer wrote, "Section 31 and 31 used to haunt the Federation. Now it's just another action set piece." Ratings told a similar story. After Section 31, 31's overexposed run in DS9's final seasons, viewership dropped by nearly a quarter, from 5.5 million for Inquisition to under 4 million by the end. Fear thrives in the shadows. Section 31's true power lay in suggestion, not explanation. Does that lingering unease make DS9 more rewatchable, or does it leave too much unresolved? Despite a backdrop of war and intrigue, Deep Space Nine crafted episodes that stand apart. Stories that invite return visits and never lose their spark. Trials and Tribulations remains a standout. earning a 9.3 on IMDb and a Hugo nomination in 1999. It is pure Star Trek, dropping the DS9 crew into the mayhem of Kirk's Tribble Crisis, and it works whether or not you know the show's larger arcs. These episodes do not just entertain, they leave a mark. Far Beyond the Stars places Sisko in 1950s America, confronting racism and the limits of hope. Duet strips the story to its core, as Kira faces the legacy of Bajor's occupation in a tense, intimate setting. Each episode is complete, yet their consequences ripple forward. Nog's story makes that permanence impossible to ignore. After the siege of AR 558, he loses his leg, a wound that is not forgotten. His recovery unfolds over the season, showing trauma as an ongoing reality, not a passing plot point. DS9 lets scars linger, physical and emotional, grounding its stories in a sense of consequence. That's the foundation beneath its most memorable episodes. There is a reason Deep Space Nine still feels like Star Trek at its core, even while breaking so many surface rules. Strip away the starships and the reset buttons, and you find 5 load-bearing principles that held the whole experiment together. First, ensemble debate, real messy, character-driven argument over every big decision. Deep Space Nine averaged over 4 major ethical showdowns per episode, and not just between Sisko and Kira. Odo, Dax, Bashir, and Quark all got a voice, and sometimes they had a grudge match. The writers called it the ensemble ethics mandate, and it meant no single captain's word was law. Second, episodic scaffolding. Before the war arc ever took over, the show stacked up 52 standalone episodes, building trust that the world and its people would stick around. That is the kind of foundation you can only lay once, and Deep Space Nine used it to earn every later risk. Third, earned darkness. The show did not just drop viewers into a crisis, it made sure the stakes were personal, and that every descent into shadow came after years of hope and hard choices. This darkness was earned, not borrowed. Fourth, audience trust. Multi-year cast contracts, overlapping arcs, and continuity clauses all signaled that you could invest in these stories because the writers would not forget them. And fifth, dramatized philosophy. Deep Space Nine never lectured. It made the big questions part of the plot, letting arguments and consequences play out in real time. That is how a show turns ideas into drama and keeps viewers thinking. So here's my question for you. Which of these rules do you think matters most for making a great Trek series? Or is there one I missed? Drop your answer in the comments. And if you want to see how all this translates to the business side of Trek, how contracts, ratings, and studio deals shape the show, stick around for the next video. Subscribe if you haven't already, and let's keep the debate going. So here's where we land. As Trek keeps reinventing itself, the real question, like one commenter put it, isn't which rules you break, but which ones you actually need. DS9 proved that earned darkness, smart structure, and trusting the audience are what endure. What episode made you a believer or changed your mind? Drop your ranking and thoughts below and stay tuned for the next deep dive.